Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Thank you for joining us for the first webinar of the Women Connect India Speaker Series 3.0, supported by USAID and Reliance Foundation. I'm your host, Ritesh Datta, and I'm excited to navigate today's conversation over the next 1 hour. Today, we talk about human-centered design to bridge the digital divide. Human-centered design, or HCD, is not a new term. And most of us working in the international development sector would have come across this term at some point or the other. But what does it mean? And how does it fit into programming with a focus on gender? Today, we explore the relevance of this approach with my accomplished guests, Ragini Pasricha and Priya Shastri. I thank both of them for taking the time to join this discussion. And thank you, audience members, for being part of this virtual event. So international development interventions are generally designed keeping in mind the need for those to be scalable, sustainable, and in the process, sometimes increase the chances of missing out on some of the important behaviors and needs of our target group. We forget to consider that these target groups are not comprised of homogeneous blocks, but people with multifaceted needs, expectations, behaviors, relationships, and are often from excluded communities as well. Now, human-centered design is an approach to optimize inclusion, adoption of our services and products developed for the welfare of target communities. Popularized by a renowned American design studio called ideo.org, HCD is a mindset rather than just another structure or management tool to put real people at the center of the development process and help us ensure that the solutions are relevant and beneficial for the people they're intended to serve in the long run. Uh, Let me now play a short video made by IDEO, which will provide you some more context of human-centered design.
Human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving, one that starts with people and ends with innovative solutions tailored to meet their needs. When you understand the people you're trying to reach and then design from their perspective, not only will you arrive at unexpected answers, but you'll come up with ideas that they'll embrace. Human-centered design is both how you think and what you do with it. It's a process that consists of 3 phases: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. The inspiration phase is about learning on the fly, opening yourself up to creative possibilities, and trusting that as long as you remain grounded in the desires of the people you're designing for, your ideas will evolve into the right solution. In the ideation phase, you come up with lots of ideas. Some too crazy to work, some too crazy not to try, and you'll refine them, tossing out the bad and improving the good. Making things helps you learn, grow, and test your ideas. Building a simple prototype gets your idea tangible and gives you something to put right back into the hands of the folks you're designing for. Without their input, you won't know if your solution is on target or how to evolve your idea. Keep iterating, testing, and integrating feedback until you've got everything just right. During the implementation phase, you'll build partnerships, shore up your business model, and get your idea out into the world, which was always the goal in the first place. Anyone can practice human-centered design, and everyone benefits because it gets us all to solutions that are adopted and embraced.
Back to today's conversation, we have with us today Priya Shastri. She leads the Indian expansion and growth portfolio of an interactive health chatbot services company called Nivi. She has over 17 years of experience in delivering large-scale digital and non-digital programs designed for social impact. We also have with us Ragini Pasricha, a senior gender and social and behavior change communications with over 20 years of experience in strategy and planning. Ragini has contributed to initiatives by various Indian organizations and solutions, including Kilkari, which is the world's largest digital health service on maternal and child health. Welcome, Priya and Ragini. Thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. We now delve deeper into the various aspects of HCD and learn from Ragini and Priya's knowledge and experience on how to incorporate this mindset and maximize our impact in our programs. Inspiration, the first phase, the video talked about it. I'm not sure if you were able to follow, but essentially, inspiration is the first phase of human-centered design, and it is the time when we identify a certain problem that we want to solve, and we spend time in the field trying to learn directly from our target groups and communities about their needs related to the problem. Let me turn to our speakers and sort of learn from them on how their experience on that phase, working on that phase has been. Ragini, would you like to share how you understood this process in your work?
Thanks, Ritesh. Uh, when you talk about design thinking, I immediately think about design masterpieces. If you think about Gaudi, if you think about the fact that he designed door handles by shaping clay in the palm of his hand, or, banisters to be the width of a palm, or windows that had these little small slanted platforms so that you could rest your elbows and lean out and look. I find, I ask myself whether good design is a product of genius and insights or experience or research. And I think it's probably all of that. Now, we're not Gaudi. We're not going to be, I know that at least I am incapable of building a World Heritage Site. But, I'm very convinced that we should be using human-centered design simply because it puts users at the heart of the solutions which we create to solve social problems. And as you mentioned, it's a challenging job. Human beings and people are so diverse, and their experiences are completely subjective. So actually, it doesn't matter how many years we have worked in the field in a community, or how much we as individuals or technical teams know about family planning or early childhood development or any other subject. Because we cannot, and I repeat, we cannot predict how the user will interact with a product or a service that we design. Now, when you throw gender into this mix, things get even murkier. Because, we talk about the digital empowerment of women. And which women are we talking about? Women like, say, Priya and me, or Abby, and many of the women who are part of this webinar are probably perfectly digitally empowered. So women don't come in one convenient category. Unless, of course, we think of gender constructs that want to make us similarly malleable and docile. Gender is all about power. It's embedded in our own thinking. It's embedded in our institutions. We are taught that this is the way things are meant to be. And so we have to remember that when we look at gender norms, we have to think about who would want to maintain status quo. The point is, how do we address these challenges? And I think that the term inspiration, when you talk about an HCD process, inspiration is very important, because we have to think of inspired ways in which to respond to the needs of users. How do we do that? We need to do that by studying their lives in all their minutiae. The challenge in the development sector for us is that even if we have committed to a donor that we are going to have a project up and running in 6 months, we still need to do intensive research, because we have to learn something that transforms our own understanding of the user. If, for example, we work on immunization, I don't think that all we should ask parents is, do you think it is important to get your child vaccinated? Or what are its benefits? I think we need to really understand what their children mean to them. What is their wish list for these children? Does whatever we are offering, a product or a service, answer that need? What is our collective cultural understanding of childhood? What does it tell us about their values? And then to peg, see whether what we are creating answers that need. So what I've understood from my work is that we have to understand the ecosystem in which people operate. And it's very important to not make any assumptions because we cannot predict the pressures under which they act and what their competing priorities are. I'm going to illustrate this with just one small example, which revealed to me personally how little I knew. So I'm going to ask you that, typically as public health professionals working on HIV, how would we define risky sexual behavior? We would say that it's having sex with a sex worker or with multiple partners without using a condom, right? Now, when we went to our target audience, which was the male clients of sex workers, we were looking at men from a lower socioeconomic demographic. These were guards, these were tailors, these were mechanics. They had a very different understanding of risk. They defined risk when we went in and did the research with them, they defined risk as something with which they lived on a daily basis. They said, when I go to work every day and I come back, I risk my life when I cross a busy road. I could be run over. If my boss gets angry with me, I'm at risk of losing my job. All these rich and educated and privileged people who come, they can insult me any minute. So as part of being a real man who was unafraid of risks, sex without a condom with a sex worker was a great high. It was pleasure. It was not risk. Now you have to think, what's going to motivate this user to use a condom? And what we found was that what they worried about was getting HIV and dying. And if word of that got out, their family in the village would be disgraced. That was the definition of risk for these men. So the bottom line is that for social change to happen, you have to decode the social fabric in which people operate. You have to understand all the actors in the system and not just this user who is your primary audience. And, I really have to warn you that this process of immersion, of immersively researching your user is pretty brutal. Not just do you have to admit that you know too little, but you also have to observe till you see patterns. Patterns emerge that allow you to gain an insight into the lives of this user. So you use observation, you use research. There are things that you explicitly ask, but you also implicitly need to interpret what is implicit. So with this process, it's very important to be intuitive. It's very important to look for patterns. And inspiration matters a lot when you create a brief, a framework, benchmarks to measure progress, objectives to be realized. All of us know that the digital empowerment of women is deeply influenced by social, economic, and cultural factors. I'm not going to go over individual barriers because I think we don't have that much time. I'm assuming that you have seen GSMA's report, but I just want to add that avoid viewing barriers in isolation. When you hear, for example, that a woman doesn't really need a mobile phone because all she needs to do is talk to her family occasionally, and she can do that on her husband's phone when he gets back from work. And when she tells you, I can't even dial a number, I need somebody to dial it for me. Intuitively, it suggests that this could be an acceptance of the scarcity of money and the social judgment on women who don't use mobile phones. And many women control for both simply by convincing themselves that they don't really need a phone, or so they would have us believe. They've brushed off the matter to avoid any controversy. It can be driven by sacrifice. You sacrifice your own needs. It can be acceptance that it's more important for men to have the phone if it is an expensive resource for the family. It can be a genuine lack of awareness on potential beneficial users. So there's a lot to tackle when it comes to legitimizing and normalizing digital access and use by women.
True.
And the struggle is to make an educated and informed guess.
Yeah.
For example, if you're working on a mobile phone intervention, do you first negotiate women's phone use with the family, or do you teach them digital skills?
Yeah.
Because, the fears could come in the way. It's implicit in the forbidding of phone use, but the explicit barrier may be that she can't even dial a number. Huh?
True.
So,
True.
that's where safe spaces like women's collectives, where you can teach them basic digital skills, become the space where you overcome individual barriers while you simultaneously design for normative barriers.
Yeah, that's, I think, such a great way to sort of, put everything together, all the very important concepts that you talked about, and the example that you gave, which will be very, very relevant to, our audience who are listening to, all those, everything that you're saying. Let me sort of take a quick minute to go back to Priya on this, and just wanted to check, so Priya, how has your experience been with this?
Yeah, thanks, Ritesh, and thanks, Ragini, for setting such a great whole discussion and taking off from some of the things that you've already sort of mentioned, how we at NIVI have actually used that, and how that I'll be sharing a practical example of how we have moved our entire journey, keeping those concepts in mind. So first of all, I'm pleased to introduce you all to NIVI, which is a digital health market powered by artificial intelligence, behavioral science, and real-time data, which helps men, women, and adolescents achieve better health outcomes. We accomplish by creating accessible digital products via popular messaging platforms like a WhatsApp that help people discover trustworthy and actionable information that is relevant to their needs and connected to local health systems. Imagine a young mother in Bihar access to a smartphone who has never used a family planning method. She can use her phone to join NIVI and chat about family planning methods, where she can get access to accurate and actionable information about different type of methods, side effects, etc., which is personalized to her needs. Not only that, she gets to the nearest health facility, chemist, for uptake of services or products. And we deliver this through our WhatsApp-based chatbot called Ask NIVI. We're building Ask NIVI to be trusted for women, men health throughout their health journey. And you've heard about chatbots. There are different organizations building chatbots. And what, with my past experience of being in this space for a very long time, what we've seen is that most chatbots stop at engagement. But what makes NIVI unique is that it's able to deliver actionable information, engagement, referral, as well as feedback mechanism from its users. It's providing essentially an ecosystem. It's like a marketplace to engage with population that we have never been able to sort of reach before. There was and continues to be an underserved market that NIVI is beginning to address. When we talk about, and when Ragini was mentioning about going into people's lives and really sort of studying, observing them, from our perspective, we may be essentially looking at the childhood immunization or an ECD or HIV, but their life is about different health needs. It's just not one health need that we are addressing. And that is what NIVI is able to provide for. People in villages and communities need access to a host of different health services, and NIVI essentially caters to that need. Talking of inspiration, Ritesh, the inspiration behind starting NIVI were the challenges. Again, going back to the audience, health consumer faces when they have to deal with a broken health system, and the frustration of not getting access to timely information and quality of care and services when they need it the most. Health journeys are more complex than we can imagine, with health consumers lacking proactive engagement, personalized options when they need to seek care, and recognizing that they all have unique circumstances and needs. And on the other hand, we're talking about the key actors that even Ragini mentioned about earlier, that it's just not the audience, it's about the actors around them. And when we look at a health consumer, there are actors who serve these health consumers and have their own set of challenges. For example, health promoters like us, NGOs or private sector companies or government who are serving health consumers, but they often find difficulty in efficiently communicating and serving their beneficiaries at scale. If we look at service and product providers such as pharmacies, they serve only a certain section of the population. We see significant gaps when it's among rural-urban divide, age groups, etc. Health payers, for instance, insurance companies, they're not covering enough population. India is one of the biggest, out-of-pocket health expenditure if we see. And then there are manufacturers and such as pharma companies who lack real-time data on consumer demand patterns and behaviors. Ragini just mentioned a while ago about that we cannot predict it. So we need to constantly have that insight about our audience, which you cannot just do one research at the beginning of the project and feel that everything's going to go great. After that, you need like constant feedback, because that user, as we think, is not sitting there. Their needs are evolving, they are growing. So we should not consider them as someone who doesn't know anything and we know everything about their life. So it's always about going back to them constantly and the ability to do so. So to address these challenges, Navy was conceptualized back in 2016 as a conversational marketplace that helps these actors improve the delivery of health services by allowing them to raise awareness on a particular health topic and change behavior as part of that. Educate, activate, and refer consumers to product and services, because it's just not about information. It is about making sure that it's actionable. We are able to kind of take them to refer them to something which they can go and access to, particularly in cases like sexual and reproductive health, where it's about confidentiality, privacy. They just cannot go to any facility. So if they trust a facility, they know that their information will be secured and safe. There's likelihood that they will go there, and oftentimes really figure out where to go, how to go, so on and so forth. So we're able to sort of facilitate that for them. And then get real-time insights on consumer demand and behavioral patterns that can inform marketing programs and provisioning of products, as well as programmatically how we need to move ahead. And currently, Navy is operating in India of more than 1.3 million users. We work with not-for-profits, commercial entities, government agencies, and they use Navy platform to generate awareness, referrals, feedback, and insights on populations and markets that they serve. So yeah, over to you, Ritesh.
Thank you, Priya. So I think, from what I'm hearing from what Ragini is saying and what you said, Priya, right now, is that one, it's important that when we are looking at designing a product or a solution, yes, we have been working in the community. We do have some understanding, but let that not get in the way. Let's not assume that we know the requirements, because communities can be complicated with their needs and behaviors. So it's very important to go back, immerse ourselves, understand their behavioral patterns, their needs, and accordingly design. And I think the other point that you both mentioned was about the iteration bit. This is not something that's like a one-time thing. You have to sort of constantly it as you build your production, your program for the target group. Thank you for that. Let me move on. Let me sort of get to the next stage of ICT, which is ideation, and which is when we sort of have spent time understanding the needs and behaviors, and we are ready to start discussing ideas, planning some solutions that we want to sort of try and work with, as a product or solution for the community. Priya, so how has this stage looked for you as you built or modified your solution to make it acceptable to your Indian target users?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks, Ritesh, for that question, and very, very, very relevant as well, given that we were across two other countries. So just sort of want to lay the ground that NIVI has been designed on the principles of scale, adaptability, flexibility, and segmentation. We realized very early on that for any solution to work, we need to be guided by the unique circumstances and needs of the audiences and that we serve, and the external environment that influences their choices and behaviors. Just to sort of reiterate, our audiences include the end users as well as our business customers. So feedback from our end users and customers essentially drive our design and deployment and how we work. So while NIVI was originally designed to launch in Kenya, the platform was able to adapt and be flexible enough to scale to Nigeria and India in subsequent years. Specifically talking of India, we were set to launch NIVI just a couple of months before COVID-19. And when COVID-19 happened, and nobody was obviously aware that COVID is going to have. So we just sort of went away with the whole thing of, we're going to launch in India. And so when COVID happened, we were, because of the flexibility and adaptability of our platform, we were able to quickly scale up and create COVID-specific conversation as challenges in accessing family planning and reproductive healthcare. In partnerships with organizations like JAPICO, Clinton Health Access Initiative, Sergo Ventures, PCI, IPL, MTV Staying Aligned Foundation, and with a grant from Women Connect Challenge, Ask NIVI created demand and improved access to contraceptive services in multiple states in India. Through these partnerships, Ask NIVI provided women with access to accurate and reliable information on family planning, contraception, sexual health. It offered a range of services, including personalized counseling, information on contraceptive methods, and reminders, most importantly, for contraceptive use. It also connected women with local healthcare providers and clinics and provided information on the availability of family planning services in their area, because particularly during the time of COVID, we do realize that access to anything was limited. So essentially, NIVI's core behavior change model reached women with information to challenge harmful social and cultural perceptions, particularly around gender roles. It also engaged women with empowering messaging that builds a sense of agency while achieving personal goals along their health journey. So NIVI created partnerships with public and private pharmacies and healthcare facilities to ease referrals for sexual and reproductive health products and services. And through these partnerships, we've been successful in reaching women who may not have had access to family planning services otherwise. And most importantly, we were also able to bring men into the conversation, particularly in the underserved and remote areas. I was talking about insights earlier. So in addition to this, NIVI was also able to generate insight on COVID-specific conversation to address challenges in accessing family planning and reproductive healthcare. In India, almost twice as many active users engaged with NIVI during the first quarter of COVID-19 than during the first quarter of the year. So despite concerns around COVID-19, users were still interested in learning about contraception and accessing family planning services. So data from those conversations show that early in pandemic, that half of the users were able to get family planning method from a pharmacy, while half faced barriers such as prescriptions, stockouts, and closures. The data also revealed that future visits to pharmacies might be constrained, not just by restrictions and closures, but also by financial limitations, as well as fears and concerns about COVID. So a lot of almost 2/3 of the users were interested in learning more about online services at that point of time. So these insights demonstrated that pandemic's impact on care-seeking behavior and to the other factors as well, such as lack of money and the need for prescription, etc., to access services. And that essentially shapes users' experience with family planning services overall. And since you were particularly talking about from an Indian perspective, currently we have over 800, roughly about 840,000 active users, which we have been able to build through these partnerships, and thanks to WCC as a grant as well. And we're currently in 3 languages, Hindi, English, and Assamese. And of these 840,000 users, we see a 10% conversion to referrals. And as our partner base also grows, so that kind of also kind of will help us expand and improve the conversion rates going forward. So yeah.
Thank you, Priya, for that. And I think I say it for the from the Women Connect community that we are so proud of the work that you've done, and that we've been able to play a small role in your growth and the fantastic work you're doing. Thank you for sharing that. Ragini, let me come to you. So, what has been the process that you followed for ideation? What are your recommendations?
So, Ritesh, the way I operate is that at the end of an immersion, I actually have a brief and a framework. I have communication objectives, and I have my research indicators on which success will be mapped. So I have a content team that works towards that. Now, with that in hand is when we get into ideation. And of course, we are striving for a breakthrough. I want to say that HCD is about disruption. HCD is about disrupting normative thinking. So I'll give you one example of disruption, a very quick one, in the interests of time. We were working on a project that dealt with marginalized populations. We were dealing with informal waste pickers. So mind you, even within the universe of waste pickers, the informal waste pickers are particularly unrecognized. And in India, we have the whole issue of caste. What was the ask from the donor, which was the H&M Foundation, that we, as BBC Media Action, where I was working at the time, had to talk about, we had to restore the pride and respect and dignity of informal waste pickers. So in my understanding, I was working to develop my own understanding of marginalization, and I read a lot of Judith Butler. Now, what Judith Butler posited was that marginalization is not something that happens by chance. It's something that's a very deliberate political social process. How do you suddenly ignore the needs of huge segments of population, right? And that until and unless you create an understanding of the fact that we are all interconnected, that all human life is fragile, indeed all life is fragile, you are not going to be able to create a social bond that obligates care of the other. So now I am applying this to this conceptual framework to waste pickers in the city of Bangalore. The intervention had committed to addressing the target population, which is residents of Bangalore, through primarily social media, because the intervention was alive during COVID. There was no way we could have a lot of on-ground activities. They are now getting into that. The breakthrough thinking that happened, the disruption was that normally you would go to people and you would tell them, either that these people do very valued work, but waste pickers themselves say this is horrible work. I don't want to do it. I'm doing it because I have no other option, right? So how do you, now disrupt the normative thinking? People also thought they were thieves. When we did our formative research, what we realized is that, first of all, waste pickers as a category is invisible. When we said, what is it in your life that matters? Nobody said living in a clean city. When you probed, waste pickers came up, but only the guy who collects garbage from your door, which is all organized through the municipal authorities. So we are talking about a completely invisible person. What we did to disrupt this was that here is a city of high rises. Here is a city with, high-tech professionals, very successful professionals. So we said that, this life that you have built for yourself, what do people post on social media, right? Your holidays, your parties, your wonderful relationships, your house. And we suggested in our thinking that this itself is fragile. This is a city that's looming on the edge of disaster, and it is the efforts of these informal waste pickers that pull you back from the brink. Now you are saying that it's not just that life which is fragile, but that your life, which you think is so smug and secure, is actually extremely fragile. That's disruption, right? And my point is also that this disruption, and when you create these ideas, they have to have an emotional meaning as well as a functional meaning. They have to be expressed, not just in words and symbols. I know that nobody wants to run a project based on feeling, on intuition, on inspiration. All I'm saying is that an over-reliance on the rational and the analytical and the informational is just as risky. Now, what I do is that I build for overlaps rather than sequential steps. Behavior is not sequential, right? So build for those overlaps and build a prototype that you test. So always remember that human-centered design is a very interactive approach. It focuses on users and their requirements, and therefore user participation and feedback, as Priya stressed, is integral to your design process. In one of the projects in which I worked, we found, after 1.5 years of research in the field, that one confounding factor was that even within small self-help groups of 8 to 10 women, you could have completely illiterate women who were farm labor and women with some education who owned small businesses like kirana shops or tailoring units. And the levels of literacy, the levels of media exposure for both sets was very different. One set could only consume IVR content, and one set wanted video content housed on a chatbot. So the testing and the refinement is crucial. Given limitations of time and money, at least once test very rigorously whether you have, whether the disruption, if you propose any, works for the users. Do they love it? Do they reject it? If you're branding your service and your product, please test the branding. I feel very strongly about overloading a single output. So I have found it very useful even to test for the pace of narration. Especially when you work with government, they want everything that can, it's like everything that a medical officer, somebody highly technical knows about, IUDs, for example, that should be part of the output. Your listener won't, your listener may just want to know, is it safe? Does it answer my need? They're not going to hold on to it. So exercise your judgment. In the matter of digital, if you're using community-based facilitators, you may find that their own digital skills need to be strengthened. And that in itself is something that can be pretty intensive. I always check, if you're narrativizing, check how your key protagonists are coming across. If they seem more educated and more savvy, then of course everyone knows that a certain kind of woman can do many things which maybe I, as a disabled woman, cannot do. Remember that disabled women are particularly invisible, especially when it comes to sexual and reproductive health needs. You almost imagine that they don't have those needs. When it comes to testing what content engages, now this is one of my biggest bugbears, because, if we fail to engage users, we've lost them. Priya brought this point up of engagement. But remember, we are in the business of social change. That's what we have to deliver. So remember, my mantra for this, my mantra is that form must follow function. If you have 3 minutes, if you have a 500-word script, if given the pace of narration for a low literate user, if you have to play a signature tune, do not fill up the remaining space with chitter chatter. Get to the point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't have engagement without the key nudge.
Mhm.
And when it comes to digital, this is something else that I have learned, that the more real you make it, the better it works. So please don't be over the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're talking to a very diverse group of women. It really helps to know who the early adopters were, what were their motivations. If you're doing skill building, what skills did they find easy to master? What were the opportunities and the motivations for gatekeepers? Because women's digital access is controlled.
Yeah.
So in fact, social support and skill building are two of the things that we often seem to forget to, allow for in digital intervention.
Yeah. I think you both sort of brought in very, very important points. I mean, I'll tell you what sort of I gathered. In fact, I've been taking notes. So one, I think, very important aspect that both of you talked about, Ragini and Priya, is that uh, it's those norms and behaviors that we have to look at. So if I want a woman in, let's say, in outside Muzaffarnagar in Bihar to start using a phone, uh, it's not just enough to ensure that she has a phone and give her training for it. What are those social norms that are stopping her from using that? And what are those behavioral patterns of hers and people and of people in the ecosystem around her? Unless I'm able to answer that, I mean, I can do whatever. I can give her one phone, I can give her 5 phones, and give her like 5 hours of training, but that may not work. Uh, the second thing that you all, I think, talked about was intersectionality, and such an important point. You're so right, Ragini. Even in self-help groups, there could be 10 women or 50 women, but there could be somebody younger who has access to a smartphone who's on Instagram. I've seen that. They have Instagram. Some girls who have Instagram and Flipkart, and then there are some women who are still sort of using a feature phone which is borrowed from her son or her husband whenever she needs to make a call, and her usage stops from there. So when we are designing, we will have to look at, uh, and these are just two extreme ends, and there are so many variables within that group as well. So how do we then design for solutions which cater to all of that? And the third point, I think, Priya, you brought in so beautifully, was adaptability of solutions. Yes, as we learn more about behaviors and norms, or as those norms and behaviors change as we influence with our solutions, or external events like COVID, are we able to sort of build solutions that are nimble enough to be able to adapt to those situations? Thank you for bringing those. Uh, Let me now go to the final phase of human-centered design, as we talk about it, which is the implementation bit. And this is when we've sort of developed the product or solution, we've created a marketing and communication strategy or outreach strategy in many in the terminology of nonprofits, to promote the uptake of a solution or your products. So Ragini, how has your experience been with this?
Before I get into implementation, because you brought up the thing about mobile phone adoption and use, Ritesh, I wanted to share with the group that we are talking to today that I have found two things extremely important, or the drivers of adoption. When we come to younger, slightly more educated, slightly wealthier women, there is almost a sense of entitlement to smartphone use. When we look at women who are from the bottom of the pyramid, the driver of use is economics. Can it help me earn more and do better by my family? So that's something that I did want to share. So now we come to, as you said, implementation. As a content strategist, what I would like to advise is that you create a menu of options that can engage diverse audience segments. It's not, so of course, one aspect of this is that, you create different language options, as Priya has created one in Assamese, and depending on funding, you can get into many other languages. But I think that the needs of people are more diverse than just language. I think that we should also think about how frequently we need to refresh content on digital platforms and build for that. But I also want to add a word of caution. I find that digital solutions are just one element in a hybrid mix. It's not the only touch point for change. And we must use them very strategically, and we must also limit our ambitions for them. And then, of course, as Priya mentioned, it's very important to build partnerships that can amplify reach. And Priya, I'm sure you can add to this because your implementation experience is huge.
No, thanks, Ragini. Actually, it sets a really nice segue, and a lot of the points that you covered in the ideation stage, and also just now, probably I'll be able to sort of give some examples of how we have, used some of those things as we were also sort of scaling NIVI. So I think the first point really about, digital is a part of a hybrid model, and it is just not the solution. And the way we obviously see NIVI is that how NIVI, Ask NIVI, the chatbot, complements other solution, on-ground solutions and other ways to reaching communities. And so also from a perspective of how do we really promote uptake of the solution, it's not like, rather than taking a one size fits all approach, a well-rounded 360-degree strategy that incorporates both offline and online approaches works best when it comes to promotion of uptake of any solution. Offline channels for outreach requires, as Ragini just mentioned, extensive orientation and training support of on-ground workers, and are useful, but at the same time, because we know that it's very useful in targeting specific groups of people who are harder to reach through online means. While digital online channels, whether it's using social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, reaching people through those platforms it's like a turnkey mass messaging solution that can be leveraged at scale to engage with diverse pool of people. Online marketing also provides for a sharper targeting and segmentation at the same time. So just to give you an example, when we partnered with Japaico in Bihar, we learned that we applied both the approaches, both offline and online, to help men and women discover NIVI. And what we found that the offline outreach by community health workers was best at reaching women who belong to a slightly older age group of 25 to 34 years old. Whereas online digital channels had a better reach among men in the same age group. So we use those two different approaches to sort of engage with our target audience and bring them on NIVI. At the same time, we constantly keep experimenting of how we are using different channels to help people discover our chatbot. So early this year, we launched the first of its kind maternal health journey on Ask NIVI. So it was a new journey that we added in addition to other health topics that are already there, which is offering a stage-based maternal health messaging, which includes engagement, facility referrals, and follow-up through pregnancy and the postnatal period. And this journey we launched in Assam in partnership with Pop Council. So unlike earlier projects where we began by engaging target population segments in the community and individuals at home, and then referring them who were interested into the health system, we took the other way around. Now in this project, what we're currently doing is that we start with patients in the health, we start with the pregnant women who come in the health system. So using the QR code, we onboard them into the health journey to support them as they return home. So this approach really complements our earlier community-first approach. As a result, we reach more segments and support more users throughout the health journey while building trust with healthcare providers and health system stakeholders. Alongside this, at the same time, we're also running online marketing campaigns to target pregnant women in Assam to help them discover Ask Nivi, because younger segment is also a critical group that we're trying to reach out through this intervention. So when we're talking about promoting a particular solution, we recognize that there are certain, there is a certain acquisition cost to get users on the platform. But once they are on Nivi, they can get lifetime access to a host of health services, ranging from maternal health on one hand, to tuberculosis, to HPV vaccines, to HIV, malaria, so on and so forth. So we currently have about 11 health topics. So whoever the user, once they are onboarded, they have access to all of that. So, but at the same time, what Ragini also mentioned is not to kind of overwhelm them with too much of information. We, in a very nice way, introduce them to different journeys. For example, it's just not kind of giving them all of the information at the same time. It's engaging with the user and seeing where the need is and then introducing them to something else. So we understand that cost is a key factor for any tech solution to scale and replicate. Hence, we've designed Nivi that drives down the cost and drives up the quality of healthcare by the comprehensiveness of the services that we offer. So that's how we're looking at implementation, where we're constantly sort of experimenting and seeing what the needs are and then sort of using that and modifying that as we go along.
Thank you, Priya, for that. And Ragini, of course. I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that, so when we look at obviously, I mean, when you're looking at the solution, it is adaptable, as we talked about earlier. It needs to be sort of low cost for it to be, when you try to modify it. But more importantly, you also talked about bringing intersectionality into as a major factor when you're also looking at your outreach strategy. So should we go only online? Should we go only offline? Or should we sort of mix both of them together? Should we only look at women as a homogeneous group and try to build a solution? Or maybe that will not work. Maybe the requirements of women who are pregnant might be a little different from, let's say, women who are not, or women who are younger compared to women who are older. Thank you for pointing that out. I have so many more questions for both of you. I wish we had the time to ask, but I have about 7 minutes. So let me quickly open this up to our colleagues who are listening in today and ask them if they have any questions for you. Please feel free to sort of use the raise hand function if any of you have questions for Ragini or Priya, and they'll be happy to answer. I don't see any hands, so maybe I'll go ahead and ask both of you my question while everybody thinks through their questions for you. So, generally we talked about all the three aspects, right? We talked about inspiration, we talked about ideation, we talked about implementation, the three phases of human-centered design, and you both sort of gave us so many insights on how that works. But broadly, using this process in design of development interventions and development solutions. So, what are some of the nuances? What has been your overall experience, Ragini, of using human-centered design in your work?
I want to say that I find that immersion is work that cannot be hurried. It needs, if you want breakthrough thinking, it requires preparation. So if you really want to break through, I mean, I can talk about at least 5 examples of maternal and child health, which after 2 decades of work on the subject, it is only recently with the redesign of a digital maternal and child health service that I have had the opportunity to do that. You can't hurry it up. I mean, typically in all these years of working with projects at scale and providing technical assistance, what were we tasked to do? create recognition of danger signs in pregnant women and neonates. When you study this ask in its granularity, you realize that mothers are not daft. If a neonate has a cough, they notice. But the realization is, where it fails is that how little time you have to act. It could be pneumonia. You think it's manageable. Now, that's a different button to be pushed, right? I can list those 19 danger signs, and you will not have averted a respiratory distress case. I mean, the pitfalls of not doing this right. So, and I want to talk about gender. I want to use these last few minutes to, we've already talked about not looking at women as a homogeneous group with the same needs. We have talked about gender being about power and institutions. I think that at all costs, we have to factor in backlash. So, I mean, you can slam me for it, but I'm saying that focus on socially acceptable ideas. The audience as well as the gatekeepers are all too aware of potential dangers. And for the bulk of women, family remains the site of empowerment, digital or otherwise. You want, in the case of digital empowerment, that even if families do not advance it, at least they do not forbid it. So, what I'm saying is that build for small incremental change. Radical change comes after some huge social upheaval. It comes from a, social movement, maybe. Please don't push grantees and, say, give me gender transformation. Work in small, where it comes to gender, because it is deeply entrenched, please look for incremental steps. And human-centered design can seem like a very abstract process. It can be something that is, you say, what does inspiration mean? What does immersion mean? All I can say is that I've tried to break it up to, exactly what we do, as is what Priya has done. And if you commit to this process and follow it, you will see results. I mean, that's really the last thought that I want to leave everyone with.
Thank you for that, Ragini, and words of wisdom. Yeah, we have just about a couple of minutes. Priya, any closing thoughts you have that you wanted to share with our audience?
No, I think that I've essentially covered it all. I mean, the key thing really is to sort of keep the audiences at the center, keep going back to your audience. Never forget that they are, I think in a way, they're ahead of the curve, from where we think. So we need to sort of constantly go back to them. We do this a lot by making sure that we go back to our real-time data and we make constant sort of modifications. Just giving a very quick example here that we made significant, that we currently changed our marketing strategy with better targeting, messaging, format that resonated with our target audience much better than what it resonated earlier. So this, not only this had driven our user acquisition cost significantly. We now have more women onboarded on the chatbot. We're getting more women interested to be on the chatbot, and it has doubled our onboarding rates as well. So we've sort of changed. In addition to that, we've also sort of changed overall our onboarding experience, which is far more personal and relatable. So it is always about those incremental changes that Ragini was talking about, is to not to rush into it, but really looking and seeing where you see that the change is needed, and you need to be able to sort of ready to be able to do that. So but now as we're expanding in India, where we're also sort of introducing new features like multimedia content, given that the content consumption in India is very much audiovisual as compared to Kenya and Nigeria, where text-based content works better. So these are a couple of things that we are always looking at what the audiences need, and then we are able to sort of essentially respond to that. And very quickly, just sort of wanted you all to sort of go back to the message. There's a blog post that Ben has shared. Ben is one of the co-founders of NIVI, where which essentially describes how we're approaching gender and gender equity in the design of chatbot conversation. And this particular example is from Nigeria. So just take a look at it. It might give you further insights and help you sort of design your products, keeping the gender equity and gender lens in mind. So yeah, that's briefly from me. Thank you so much, Ritesh and Ragini.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Ragini. We will have to close. Obviously, we don't have any more time. But to our colleagues in the audience, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions for our esteemed guests, I will be happy to facilitate a conversation. Please write to me. Um, Also, please note that, especially for our Women Connect Challenge India grantees, we will be reaching out to you to understand your reaction, your experience with this webinar. We would like to learn from you and share your experience as well with others on using human-centered design in your work. And for that, we will reach out over the next few days. And I also wanted to thank you for attending this event. Ragini and Priya, again, I'm so grateful that you took the time, to come sit with us, share your learnings, your words of wisdom with us, and I'm sure we will reach out with more questions for the both of you. Wish you everyone a great day ahead, and goodbye for now.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Everyone.